Good morning, everyone. Today's topic is processing law enforcement crime scenes. So, in the last class, we stopped with how a crime scene investigation is done for other than private sector investigations. Okay, now we're going to look at if it is a public sector or law enforcement crime scene, how the processing can be done. And many of these things we have already seen in earlier, classes. Okay, so we already know that there are rules for searching and seizure. There should be a warrant with all the details clearly given to seize any particular data. Exactly what is required in our, search and seizure means acquiring the evidence and taking it to our labs. Okay, so exactly what is required should be given in that particular warrant. Otherwise, the evidence will not be considered admissible in court. Okay, now in US, if a warrant should be signed by a judge, the most important thing is that there should be probable cause. The law enforcement officer should have enough, proof beforehand to have a suspicion that that particular person has done a particular crime and where the evidence of that crime could be found out. That is called probable seizure. Okay, so there must be facts or circumstances that will lead a reasonable person to believe that the crime has been committed or that information can be found about the crime that has been committed. Okay, now with probable cause, the police can get a search warrant from a particular judge, and then with this, the search warrant is the authorization for the law enforcement agency to collect the evidence. So then they can go and search a particular premises or a particular, organization and seize the evidence that they would like. Okay. Now, in US, the Fourth Amendment, it states that only warrants particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized can be issued. So a warrant cannot be, in general. It has to be exactly the place, the person, or the things that can be searched and seized. Okay, this is an example of a warrant wording for computer evidence. Okay, here, seize and examine by persons qualified to do so and in a laboratory setting any and all electronic data processing and computer storage devices, including central processing units, internal and peripheral storage devices such as fixed disks, external disks, floppy disks, and diskettes, tape drives and tapes, optical storage devices, optical readers and scanning devices, CD-ROM drives and compact disks and related hardware, digital cameras and digital storage media, operating logs, software and operating instructions or operating manuals, computer materials, software and programs used to communicate with other terminals via telephone or other means, and any computer modems, monitors, printers, etc. that may have been used while engaging in what was the particular crime that they suspect that particular organization or person for. That should be clearly mentioned here. Specify the illegal conduct as defined in the annotated code of, this is the, law that states that this can be done. Okay, Code of Maryland amended and revised. Okay, so this is a typical wording for seizing, for search and seizure of computer evidence. Okay, now understanding concepts and terms that are used in warrants. Okay, one term is innocent information, unrelated information, which often get included in the evidence when we are trying to recover actual evidence. Okay, that is innocent information. Judges often issue a limiting phrase to the warrant. That limiting phrase means how much can be searched and seized, so that it allows the police or law enforcement agencies to separate this innocent information from actual evidence. Okay. Next is plain view doctrine. objects which, when the officer is trying to search for a particular thing, but the warrant does not cover something, but this is directly in plain view of where this officer is. In that case, that particular, even if, that warrant is not specifically for that particular object, if the warrant was there for that particular place, then if this officer happened to see something that could be evidence, he can seize that. Knock and announce. Okay, whenever a warrant is being executed, the officers must knock on the door, announce themselves, identify themselves as officers, and give the warrant before they start their search and seize procedure. Okay, now, before going for the search, preparing for a search. Preparing for a computer search and seizure is one of the most important steps in computing investigation, especially if we are trying to do on-scene evidence collection. Okay, and when we are making copies, when we are, disconnecting the system or hardware from the particular network or place. Each of these things have specific steps and processes and procedures that needs to be followed. Okay, now to perform these tasks, first, we might need some answers from the victim and maybe an informant if we have an informant. Okay, so the police detective that is assigned to this case, or a law enforcement witness, or a manager or co-worker, or any person of interest for this particular investigation. The first step is to, interview these people and get exact information about the crime before deciding, how to do the search and seizure procedure. Okay. Next is identifying the nature of the case. Okay. So when an investigation case is assigned to an investigator, the first step will be to identify what kind of crime has occurred, whether it is in private sector or public sector, how, what kind of things have happened, and where to find the information, who might have been the, culprits, etc. There should be a understanding of the nature of the case before a search is conducted. Okay. The actual crime or the nature of the crime will determine how the searching should proceed. What types of assets or resources should be investigated and things like that will be determined by our understanding of the nature of the case. Next is identifying the type of computing system. Okay, in the case of law enforcement, this is difficult because the crime scene isn't controlled. Okay, that is, it is not under an organization. There are no policies issued and things like that. So if it is a crime scene, then sometimes, the type of computing system would not be known before the search. But if we can identify the computing system, the size of the drive on the suspect's computer, etc., accordingly, steps can be taken for the search and seizure procedure. Okay, especially if the system is going to be processed at the scene of the crime itself. Okay, now some things are determining the operating system, hardware, softwares, applications involved, etc. Okay, now determining whether you can seize a computer, whether you can disconnect and take it to your lab. That needs to be decided, especially in today's day and age. The type of case and location of the evidence is one method by which we can determine whether we need to remove the computer. Okay, the type of the case and the location of the evidence. Okay, now to do this, a warrant is required, and there should be a secure way by which that particular equipment can be transported to the forensic lab. Okay, now in case the removing the computer or the devices causes irreparable harm to a business, then most probably the judge will not give us a warrant to remove it and take it off-site. So accordingly, steps should be taken to recover the evidence. Okay, now another additional complication in seizing the computer, removing it from that on-site location, is that sometimes files will be stored off-site that can only be accessed remotely. In that case, we may not be allowed to, go and get the remote computer. Okay, so we have to determine which resources are needed to acquire the remote data. And we have seen a remote data acquisition in 2 class earlier. Okay, there are tools for that. Now, obtaining a detailed description of the location. Now, normally when we are investigating a case, when the investigator investigates a case, we get as much information as possible before we move to the exact location. Okay. And when we understand where we need to collect the evidence from, we need to identify potential hazards. Okay. So if required, a hazmat team or, any specific, personnel required or methods required, all that should be done. In case of hazmat team is only when there is, nuclear, nuclear related or any hazardous material or dangerous goods. In that case, a hazmat team will be called to interact in that particular location. Once they clear the location, only then the investigating team can enter into the premises. Now, what is the hazmat guidelines? A hazmat technician needs to acquire the image following your instructions. So if we cannot enter, the technician needs to follow our instructions and acquire the image. Okay. Now, we need to provide them with all the materials. So target drive or special bags, decontamination of the bags. If temperatures are high, checking the temperatures, all these things, they will do. Okay. Now, who is in charge? For a particular investigation, for corporate computing investigations, only one person is required to respond. Okay. In the case of law enforcement agencies, sometimes there can be large-scale investigations or there might be more than one investigators for a law enforcement agency, depending on what sort of crime. Okay, so a lead detective might be designated as the investigator. In the case of most corporate investigations, one person will be assigned to the case. Using additional technical expertise, if required, we need to call in specialists. So a particular OS or RAID servers or databases. Okay, finding the right person is always a challenge. So normally, if required, only specialists will be called in. Okay, now to do this, depending on what kind of operating system, what kind of crime happens, we need to have more specialists in the investigation technique so that, when evidence is collected, or, damage or corruption does not happen. Now, next step is determining the tools that are required. Normally, we just use FTK, forensically suitable tools to collect the evidence and analyze the evidence. So preparing the tools that are needed for that particular incident or crime scene is an important step. And normally, the initial response field kit will be a bag in which certain items are available. We will look at some of the details, what all things are required. So this will normally be lightweight and easy to transport. If more, tools are required, it has to be removed. The system has to be taken to a lab. And that is an extensive response field kit, which has more tools suitable for a particular crime scene. Okay, these are some of the initial response field kits. You have a forensic kit, a laptop, a flashlight, a digital camera. And these are other tools, okay? And the number of items of a particular kind that will be there. So you have a computer toolkit, large capacity drive, IDE ribbon cable, SATA cable, forensic boot media, laptop IDs, laptop FireWire or USB, dual write protect external bay, flashlight, digital camera, evidence log forms, computer evidence bags, evidence labels, tape, tags, external USB devices, all these are there in multiple. You can see 10, 10, 20, 10. Others, a notebook or dictation recorder, permanent ink marker, etc., are only there as one item. So this is some of the items that will be in your initial response field kit. Now, if it is an extensive response field kit, there are extra items. Okay, so this varies. There are a number of manuals, OS references, forensic analysis guides. Initial response field kit will be there, and in addition, portable PC with SCSI card, electric power strips, additional hand tools, bolt cutter, pry bar, hacksaw, leather gloves and disposable latex gloves or other assorted size gloves, hand, truck and luggage cart if it's heavy, large garbage bags and large cardboard boxes with packing tape, rubber bands or assorted sizes, magnifying glass, printer paper, small brush for cleaning dust, USB drives, external drives, converter cables, additional assorted hard drives, etc. So depending on what kind of scene we are going to collect data from, we might need the initial response field kit or the extensive response field kit. Okay, now preparing the investigation team. Before beginning the actual investigation, including search and seizure, we must review the facts, plan, and objectives must be shared with the investigation team. Only then, when we do a search and seizure, we can collect the right amount of right evidence and the appropriate methods should be followed. Okay, now goals for scene processing. Collect the evidence and secure the evidence. This is the goal for a scene processing on site. Okay, now slow response in the case of evidence collection, because it is digital evidence, it could be lost. So we should do things as fast and as accurate as possible. Then the next step is securing the computer incident or crime scene. So when we move for the actual search, we must preserve the evidence and keep the information confidential. Okay, so define a secure parameter and tape it off. A yellow tape will be, put up around the crime scene. And legal authority keeps unnecessary people outside of that particular perimeter. And, if anybody refuses to comply or obstructs justice, then accordingly actions can be taken. Now, professional curiosity in the investigation team, especially because it is computer evidence that we are trying to collect, this can destroy evidence, and only people who understand this and who have experience with crime scene processing should be allowed to search and seize for evidence. Seizing digital evidence at the scene. It must be done by law enforcement agencies or experts with the proper warrant. In the case of corporate investigators, we rarely need to seize the evidence. That means we don't need to take it out of the premises. When seizing computer evidence in criminal investigations, there are standards that needs to be followed, steps, forms that need to be filled in. Those steps should be followed. In a civil investigation also, the same steps for seizure should be used, and accordingly, documentation should be done. Whenever we are, if we do not understand how to do a particular thing, there should be law enforcement, attorney or counselor, lawyer who knows the steps and will be able to give us guidelines. Preparing to acquire digital evidence. Okay, the evidence that we acquire at the scene depends on the nature of the case. So depending on what kind of crime has occurred, that will determine what kind of evidence and what steps we should take. So we need to ask senior forensics examiners or investigators to give us details like, what kind of, whether we need to take the entire computer or only with all peripherals and media in the immediate area, whether the computer is going to be protected or needs to be protected, the media for transportation to the lab, if the computer is powered in when the investigator arrived, those kind of questions. So relevant questions that can determine how we need to safely and securely transport the evidence should be asked by the technician to the investigation supervisors. Okay, other questions that should be asked is the suspect you're investigating in immediate area, that is, can they tamper with the evidence? Okay, is it possible that the suspect has damaged or destroyed the computer or peripherals or media? Will you separate the suspect from the computer? Do we know who he is? Okay, all sorts of questions which is relevant for that particular case. Okay. Then some of the guidelines for processing an incident or crime scene. Keep a journal. Everything should be documented. Every activity should be documented. The scene should be secured. Be professional and courteous with onlookers and remove people who are not part of the investigation. Take videos, still recordings. We've seen all this in the first chapter. Pay attention to detail. Sketch the incident or crime scene if required. Check computers as soon as possible. Okay. Now, if the computer is switched on and, up and running, then the old rule used to be to, switch off the computer. Okay. But don't cut the electric power to a running system unless it's an older version of Windows or MS-DOS system. Okay. Usually, if it is running, when we switch it off, probably we might lose some sort of evidence. So live acquisition is normally what needs to be done. In case you're shutting down the system, if it is Windows XP or later, or in Linux or Unix, a normal shutdown must be done to preserve the log files. Okay. Save the data from the current applications as safely as possible. Record all active windows or shell sessions. Photograph the screen. Make notes of everything you do when you are trying to copy, from a live system. Save open files to external drives or target drives or a network share. If this is not possible, save them with new names. Okay. Then after you have done it, or taken all precautions to save any evidence that is there on the live system, then you will close the application and shut down the computer. This is very important. These steps that need to be followed if we are handling a running computer. Okay. Next, guidelines. Bag and tag the evidence following these steps. Assign a person to collect and log all evidence. Tag all evidence that we collect with the date, time, serial number or unique features of that particular device or hardware, make and model, name of the person who has collected it. So there is a tag, label. All the information on that label should be filled in. Okay. Then maintain 2 separate logs of collected evidence so that if we lose one also, we have the other log and it can be used to verify each other. Maintain constant control, that is chain of custody, should be maintained once the evidence has been removed. Then look for information related to the investigation. Like if there are, sticky notes or, pieces of paper or something like that with passwords, passphrases, pins, bank accounts, look at papers in drawers or trash cans, etc. Collect documentation and media related to the investigation. So hardware, software, media, backup media, documentation manuals, etc. Whatever you can find that is related to the investigation, all that should be collected. In case we are processing data centers with RAID systems, then sparse acquisition, we have seen this earlier, sparse acquisition is normally followed. So we don't try to make copies of all the information. Instead, we try to make copies of relevant information so that we do not lose any kind of or forget to collect any kind of evidence, but at the same time, we don't have large amounts of data to wade through. Okay. Now, the drawback is sometimes we forget to, or we don't realize that there could be information free or slack spaces and don't retrieve those kind of data. Okay. Now, in case we require a specialist, a technical advisor, they can help us in case we cannot directly have their services, then they can help us by giving us a list of tools or processes that require to be used, guide us through what locations the data or logs can be, collected from, and help us create search warrants, etc. for the particular evidence collection. Now, in case we are using a technical advisor, this advisor is responsible for knowing all the aspects of the seized system, directing the investigation and handling sensitive material, helping to secure the scene, helping to document the strategies and search for seize and seizure, conducting, trainings if required, documenting the activities, and helping to conduct the search and seizure. If they're not physically present, they will give us guidance. Documenting evidence in the lab. Record your activities and findings as you work. This we have seen many times. This is very important for the case to be admissible, for the case to, be brought before a court, legal system. Maintain a journal to record the steps that you take as you process evidence. The goal is to be able to reproduce the same results. So if another investigator repeats the same steps, they should get the same results. So all information should be journaled properly. And a journal serves as a reference. Sometimes the case will be coming before the judge years after we have actually done the process of seizure. So this can also help us, remember the things that we have done, present the findings accordingly. Okay. Now, when we are processing and handling digital evidence, integrity of the digital evidence in the lab must be verified. So we use accordingly, tools, forensically sound tools for creating images to, store and compare hashes and store the evidence in a secure location. Next is storing digital evidence. This we have seen earlier. When we store the media, it depends on how long we want to store the evidence. So CDRs or DVDs, this is the ideal media, the capacity up to 17 GB and lifespan is 2 to 5 years. So when we are, making copies, this is a good option. Now, if we have large amounts of data, then we might use magnetic tapes. These are some of the, tape drives and drives which are used for evidence, storing the digital evidence that is collected in a particular place. Evidence retention and media storage needs to help maintain chain of custody for digital evidence. Normally, the forensic tool that is used itself for storage, etc., they provide us with chain of custody, locations. And normally to, keep it safe, the evidence that is collected is restricted to a lab or evidence storage area. It will not be taken out of the, secure location. Labs should have a sign-in roster for all visitors and why they have taken it, time that they have taken it, all these kind of information should be there. And if the evidence is needed to be retained indefinitely, then that provision will also be there in the lab itself. Okay. This is an example of a sample log file. So the item and the item tag will be there. And then the person who is taking it out, the date the item was logged out, the time the item was logged out, then the date and time that the item was logged back in. Okay, documenting evidence. Create or use an evidence custody form. We have seen evidence custody form details also earlier. So every time we, collect an evidence, identify the evidence, identify who has handled the evidence, list the dates and times the evidence was handled, and to show that the evidence was not corrupted, the hash value each time should be compared and stored. Include all detailed information you might need to refer. And evidence bags must also include labels and forms so that, the evidence is always securely handled for later prosecution. Next is obtaining a digital hash. We've seen this several times. There are different types of hashes that can be found. So forensically sound methods are normally to be used. CRC is one method, but it is not considered forensically sound. So digital hashes like MD5 or SHA is normally used. There are 3 rules for forensic hashes. Somebody should not be able to predict the hash. Okay. And no 2 hash values should be the same. So 2 different devices or files should not have the same hash. If anything changes on the file, the hash value must also change. Okay. Now, in both MD5 and SHA-1, collisions can occur. So most computer forensic hashing needs can be satisfied with a non-keyed hash set. So unique hash number generation by software tools can be used. A keyed hash set, if required, is to create encrypted utility secrets. And normally all this, digital hashing and storing methods are available on our FTK, Forensic Toolkit. Okay, so this is the FTK imager, and this is the, to verify the results. So earlier hashes and current hashes can be compared. Finally, reviewing a case. The general task you perform in a computer forensic case is identifying the case requirement, plan the investigation, conduct the investigation, complete the case report, and critique the case. Okay, so these 5 steps we have seen later. Now, if it is a civil investigation, then it is a low-level investigation, and normally a criminal case, it is a non-criminal case. Okay, so accordingly, the review will be done. The common activities and practices are the outlook or email of the suspect will be checked, evidence will be collected, surveillances, if needed, will be checked and collected, and other sniffing tools for data transmission will also be used. So covert surveillance tools like Spectre, WinWhatWare, EnCase, etc. can be used for surveillance. Now, if it's a criminal investigation like fraud or check fraud or homicide, there is murder or things like that, then there should be a warrant and the search area will be limited. Okay, so search area, normal search areas for a particular crime will be given like this. So cables and computer printers will be given. Location will be specified in the warrant. Must wait for a new warrant before searching a new area. Okay, so things like that is important. Reviewing the background information of a case. If a company calls Superior Bicycles, it specializes in creating new and inventive modes of human-driven transportation. 2 employees, Chris Murphy and Noah Jericho, have been missing for several days. So a USB drive has been recovered from Chris's office with evidence that he had been conducting a side business using company computers. So what is required? When we are doing a, initial information to find information, nature of the case, suspects' names, activities, hardware and software specifications must first be identified. And then we plan the investigation, list what can be assumed from our, initial information collection. And then several incidents that may or may not be related. If that is there, then accordingly information should be collected. Suspect's computer can contain information. And if someone else has used the suspect's computer, then that person can also be investigated. Make an image of the suspect's computer, describe, and use forensic tools to do the analysis. Okay. Now, conducting the investigation using FTK, extract the image using bitstream imaging and analyze the image. And to do this, you have got, default provisions are there in FTK. This is to do the reviewing. Okay, all items, optimal settings, email emphasis, text emphasis, graphics emphasis, lots of provisions are there in this to refine a particular case. Depending on what we require, we can select the kind of things that we require. Okay, this is an evidence information box, dialog box. So where we have stored the evidence display name, evidence identification name or number, the comments that we need to, write. So in this particular case, it is evidence on Chris and no. Location, local evidence time zone. So the time that this particular evidence was collected, those kind of information automatically within FTK itself, because it's a forensic toolkit, all these kind of evidence is there. Now, if you want to add evidence, then that kind of, provision is available over here. If you want to remove evidence, you want to edit evidence, refine evidence, etc., everything will be there, and logs also will be created accordingly. Okay. A case summary can be built. So in the case of in Chris's USB, what kind of information was there? All that can be stored. Okay. The processing files dialog box. So depending on what kind of processing we need to do, we can, select the evidence, give a name, what kind of options we need to use, logging, etc. All that can be done in FTK. Selecting the file of interest. This is the, FTK directory, and we can, from this, depending on where we have selected, this is a particular case. When that particular case is selected, all the files for that particular case is listed in this dialog box. And accordingly, there are lots of things that can be done. If a bookmark needs to be created, we've seen this earlier, then the information on the bookmark can be given. If it needs to be included in a report or exported as files, etc., whatever required, that can be done. And with this, we are concluding the 4th module. In the next class, we will begin with the 5th. Thank you very much.